My wife told me she wants a baby, using her ex's sperm from an old IVF sample. I'm her husband of 5 years. I calmly showed her the divorce papers I'd been saving for this exact moment. I, 34 male, had been with Rachel, 32, for 7 years total, married for the last 5 of them. We lived in a craftsman-style home in Portland that we'd renovated together, room by room, argument by argument, paint swatch by paint swatch. I'm a software engineer for a cybersecurity firm, and she worked as a dental hygienist at a practice downtown. On paper, we looked perfect. Sunday farmers markets, matching hiking boots, a golden retriever named Biscuit. The kind of life that makes your high school friends jealous on social media. But I'd known for 8 months that something was rotting beneath the surface. It started innocuously enough. Rachel became distant after her cousin's baby shower last spring. She'd come home quiet, her eyes red-rimmed, and when I asked what was wrong, she said she was just tired. But the tiredness never lifted. She started spending hours on her phone, angling the screen away when I walked past. She joined online support groups for women dealing with complex fertility situations. I found the browser history by accident when I borrowed her laptop to check my email. The real alarm bells started ringing when she began mentioning Marcus more frequently. Marcus, her ex-fiancé from nearly a decade ago, before we'd even met. They'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 1, and according to the story she told me early in our relationship, they'd split amicably when he took a job in Singapore and neither wanted long distance. She'd always described him as a good guy, just wrong timing. Suddenly Marcus was appearing in conversations weekly. Marcus always said Portland would become too expensive. Marcus introduced me to that band. Marcus had this interesting perspective on artificial intelligence. Each mention felt like a small needle pushed under my skin. Then came the Facebook friend request she accepted from him. Then the Instagram follow. Then the catching up over coffee because he's back in town for a few months consulting. She told me about that coffee date casually, like it was nothing. My stomach had twisted into knots, but I'd smiled and said that was nice. Happy she could reconnect with an old friend. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperation makes people do desperate things. I installed monitoring software on our shared tablet, the one she sometimes used in bed before sleeping. I told myself I just needed to know if I was being paranoid or if my instincts were right. I told myself I'd delete it once I confirmed everything was fine. Everything was not fine. The messages I found weren't sexual. Somehow that almost made it worse. They were intimate in a way that cut deeper than physical betrayal. Long conversations about their past, about the life they'd planned together, about regrets and what-ifs. Rachel told him she thought about him often, that she'd never stopped wondering if letting him go was the biggest mistake of her life. Marcus responded that the years in Singapore had been empty, that he'd compared every woman to her and none measured up. And then came the discussion about the embryos. Apparently, during their engagement, they'd done IVF. Rachel had endometriosis that threatened her fertility, so they'd created and frozen embryos as insurance for their future. When they broke up, the embryos stayed in storage under both their names at a fertility clinic. Marcus had kept paying the storage fees all these years, a detail that made my blood run cold. Who does that unless they're keeping the door open? In their messages, Marcus suggested they could finally use what we created together. Rachel's response wasn't no. It was, I need to think about how to approach this, like I was an obstacle to be managed rather than her husband. I sat in my car in our driveway for 2 hours that night, reading and rereading those messages until my eyes burned. When I finally went inside, Rachel was asleep, curled on her side of the bed with Biscuit at her feet. She looked peaceful, innocent. I stood in the doorway watching her, this person I'd built a life with, and felt like I was staring at a stranger. The next morning, I called my buddy Dave, who's a divorce attorney. I'd been the best man at his wedding. He owed me a favor. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, then said the words that became my mantra for the next 8 months. Document everything. Prepare for the worst. Hope you're wrong. But I wasn't wrong. I started taking screenshots of every conversation. I noted dates and times of her meetings with Marcus. She'd started seeing him weekly, always with convenient excuses about book clubs or yoga classes that I'd verify through location data didn't exist. I organized our finances, quietly moving my inheritance from my grandfather into a separate account. I consulted with Dave regularly, building an airtight case. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, but I wanted to be ready for anything. The hardest part was acting normal. Coming home every day, kissing her hello, asking about her day, all while knowing what was happening behind my back. Some nights I'd cook dinner and watch her across the table, laughing at something on her phone. Probably him, and I'd wonder when exactly I'd become so disposable to her. Was it gradual? Or was there a specific moment when she'd looked at me and decided I wasn't enough? I kept the facade up perfectly. I even suggested we book a trip to Hawaii for our anniversary. She seemed surprised, happy even, like she was relieved I was still invested. We picked out flights together. I let her believe everything was fine while I had Dave draw up divorce papers and put together my exit strategy. Then last Tuesday, she came home from work with an unusual expression, nervous excitement, like a kid about to show their parents a questionable report card. She asked if we could talk about something important. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my face neutral and said sure, gesturing to the couch. Rachel sat down, twisting her wedding ring, a habit she developed recently. She took a breath and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. She talked about her endometriosis, about her fears of infertility, about how much she wanted to be a mother. All things we'd discussed before during honest conversations about our future. But then she pivoted. "I have an opportunity," she said, looking at her hands rather than at me. "Before you and I met, Marcus and I created embryos through IVF. They're still viable, still in storage. We've been talking, and he's willing to let me use them." She finally looked up, her eyes searching my face. "I know this is unconventional, but these embryos are already my genetic children, technically. The endometriosis has gotten worse, and my doctor says my fertility window is closing. This might be my only chance." I sat there absolutely still. Part of me had expected this conversation, but hearing it out loud, hearing my wife ask to have another man's baby, hit differently than I'd imagined. "You want to carry Marcus's child," I said flatly. "Our child," she corrected quickly. "Genetically, yes, but you'd raise them with me. You'd be their father in every way that matters. Marcus would just be a donor, essentially. He'd sign away parental rights." The audacity of it stole my breath. She'd been emotionally cheating with her ex for months, plotting this behind my back, and now presented it like a reasonable request. Like I should feel grateful to raise the biological child of the man she clearly still loved. "I've thought about this constantly," Rachel continued, mistaking my silence for consideration. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we could finally start the family we've always wanted. The embryos are already there, already paid for. We wouldn't have to go through the IVF process ourselves, which is so expensive and invasive, and my body." "Stop," I said quietly. She stopped, blinking at me. I stood up, walked to our home office, and returned with the manila folder I'd kept hidden in my filing cabinet under Tax Documents 2019. I'd been carrying that folder to and from work for the past 2 weeks, waiting, somehow knowing this moment would come. I sat back down and placed the folder on the coffee table between us. "What's this?" Rachel asked. "Open it." She did. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages. Divorce papers, complete and ready for signatures. Property division agreements. Documentation of our separate finances. Printed screenshots of her messages with Marcus, highlighted and annotated. "You've been planning to leave me?" Her voice came out strangled. "Planning to protect myself," I corrected. "For 8 months now, since you started your affair." "It's not an affair. We haven't been physical. Emotional infidelity is still infidelity. Rachel, you've been building a life with him in your head while I'm sitting right here. Did you think I wouldn't notice? The constant texting, the secret meetings, the way you say his name like a prayer." Tears started streaming down her face. "You're taking this all wrong. I love you. I married you. The embryos were from before. The embryos are an excuse. I said, my voice harder than I'd ever used with her. You want to reconnect with Marcus. You want the life you think you should have had. And instead of being honest with me, instead of ending our marriage with dignity, you concocted this insane plan where I'd raise his child while you play happy family with your first love. That's not... I didn't... She was sobbing now, clutching the papers. We can work through this. Counseling. I'll cut contact with Marcus. Please. I felt nothing. 8 months of grief had already happened privately. This was just the epilogue. The papers are fair, I said. You keep the house, it was mostly your inheritance that bought it anyway. I'll take my accounts, my car, my belongings. Biscuit. That one hurt. We can work out custody of the dog. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm just done. Rachel looked up at me with devastated eyes. You've been planning this for months? You've been lying to me this whole time. The irony almost made me laugh. I've been protecting myself while you betrayed me. There's a difference. I left her crying on the couch and went to the guest room, where I'd already packed 2 suitcases. I'd arranged a month-to-month lease on an apartment downtown. Dave had said moving out might hurt me in the divorce, but I couldn't stay in that house another night. As I loaded my car, Rachel stood in the doorway, mascara running, looking small and broken. Part of me still loved her, you don't just switch that off. But I loved myself more. I loved the future I deserved more. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I know, I said, and I meant it. She'd probably rationalized everything, made it make sense in her mind. People are good at that. But you did hurt me. You've been hurting me for months while I pretended not to bleed. I drove away without looking back. The next weeks were mechanical. Lawyers, paperwork, dividing a life into neat legal boxes. Rachel tried calling, texting, showing up at my new apartment. She'd broken up with Marcus, she said. She'd made a terrible mistake. Could we please try counseling? But I'd already grieved the marriage. I'd already mourned who I thought she was. You can't unbetray someone. The divorce finalized 3 months ago. I got my settlement, my freedom, and split custody of Biscuit. Rachel moved to Seattle shortly after. Couldn't handle running into me at the grocery store, she said. I heard through mutual friends that she and Marcus didn't work out. Turns out fantasy relationships rarely survive reality. I'm doing better now. Started therapy. Joined a climbing gym. Went on a few dates, though nothing serious yet. I'm learning to trust again, slowly, the way you learn to walk on a broken ankle. Sometimes people ask if I regret how I handled it. The secret preparation, the dramatic reveal. But I don't. Rachel had been planning her betrayal for months. I was just smart enough to plan my protection. When someone shows you they're willing to rewrite your entire life without your consent, you don't owe them a heads up before you leave. I saved myself. Sometimes that's the only revenge you need.